Hello, students. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that I can help you with a few questions you may be having on your linear worksheet. So we're going to go over the linear equalities worksheet today, solving and graphing inequalities. We're going to talk about solving just regular equations, and we're going to take those concepts that we know about solving regular equations and talk about how we can put that into solving an inequality. And then we're also going to graph an inequality. Talk about that. So what are linear inequalities? So they're just mathematical sentences, but instead of containing equal signs like you're used to, they contain the less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to signs. So those are the four main signs we're going to deal with. And the solution to the inequality is any number that makes the inequality true. So we're going to go into more detail about that. And then there's also the graph of an inequality. So these are just a couple of examples of graphs of inequalities. But the main things that you remember is that they do need to contain one of these symbols according to the directions or the question, and then you're also going to graph as well. So let's talk about the four main symbols that you're going to use. Again, it's the less than or the greater than. Notice these signs, you've been introduced to these for years now. But then we have this one, which is the less than or equal to. And notice that there is a line underneath the inequality sign. And this one is also a line under the inequality sign. And remember that that means it could be equal to. Okay? And what does this mean? What do the closed or open circles mean? So when we're graphing it, let's take, for example, a number line. Get out my pen here. When we're doing a number line, for example, if we said, okay, here's 0, 1, 2. If we said that x is less than 2, I would want an open circle, right? And I would put my open circle there on 2, and I would draw my arrow shooting this way because I said that I wanted x less than that, right? But what if I said I wanted x is less than or equal to 2? That's when I would do a closed circle, and then I'm going to shoot my arrow down this way. So less than or equal to means a closed circle. So look at my circles. That's where you put the circle on the graph according to the question. Okay? So open circle, closed circle. So you will need to know this information in order to graph correctly. So let's just talk about a regular equation. And how do we solve this? Do you remember how we solve regular equations? We always want to combine like terms, right? So this is the number 7 and this is the number 13. They're just numbers. They don't have numbers stuck next to them. So what we do to one side, we need to do to the other. So we need to subtract the 7 from both sides to get rid of it on one side so that we can clean up our equation. So we're just going to bring down 2x. 13 minus 7 equals 6. And then what do we do? Remember, any time we see this 2 times x, that means multiplication. And so in algebra, we're always trying to do the opposite to get rid of things. We need it always cleaned up. So instead of multiplying, we're going to divide. And what we do to one side, we always do to the other. Now we're going to clean this up, and x equals 3, right? That's just your basic equation. So when we're dealing with inequalities, like what I like to tell my students to do is replace this equal sign with the greater than or less than sign, and you're still going to solve it the same exact way. So let's just replace this 2x plus 7 with a inequality sign right there. So see, instead of the equal sign, all I'm doing is replacing it. And this always throws students off when they get the inequality sign in there. And I say, no, just treat it just like you would if it were an equal sign. You're going to solve it the same exact way. So we would subtract 7 from both sides, bring down our 2x, and there we go, bringing down that inequality sign. And then you're still going to end up doing the same exact thing, dividing by 2 on the both sides. So now it just says x is greater than or equal to 3. So I still have 3 as my solution. We've just replaced that equal sign with an inequality sign. So don't let that throw you off. You're still going to perform the algebra the same exact way. Let's go over a few more examples and let's also graph them. So again, remember what this looks like as a regular algebraic equation. Let me just put an equal sign in there instead of this inequality sign. What would you do if there was an equal sign? Remember when there's a number on bottom, you pull it out from underneath and you multiply it on both sides. Of course, cancels out on the left side. So x is equal to -10, right? That's what we would have done if there would have been an equal sign there. Same thing if there's an inequality sign. We're going to solve it the same exact way. We're going to pull out that 2 from underneath, multiply it on this side, left side, it makes it cancel out. What we do to one side, we always do to the other. So x is less than or equal to -10. Okay, look at that. I got the same thing, -10. The only difference is I have an inequality sign in here. But now the other part of these inequalities is that we need to be able to graph them correctly. So I'm going to look at my solution. X is telling us it's less than or equal to -10. So I need to go find my -10 on the graph. And am I going to put a closed circle or an open circle? I'm going to put a closed circle. If you said closed circle, you're correct. And it says that x is less than, so I'm going to shoot my arrow down this way. S less than or equal to -10. So this is how I would graph that there. Okay? Let's do one more example. Again, treat this as if it were just a regular algebraic equation. What would you do if it were negative? Let me change my color here. What would you do if it were -3t is equal to 21? You'd look at that and you say, oh, well, I just divide by -3 on both sides, and then t is equal to -7, right? So same thing with this, same exact thing when you put in the inequality sign. Divide by -3 on both sides. But one more little thing to mention about inequalities. If you divide or multiply by a negative, you must flip this inequality sign. So now instead of less than, it's going to be greater than or equal to -7. So once again, I still got -7 as my solution, but look at your inequality sign. Let's graph this one. Where do you think you would graph that? Would you use a closed circle or an open circle? So let's go down to -7 because that's what it's telling us. So let's locate -7 on our graph. Let's use a closed circle because remember when it's equal to, we're going to do that. But this time it's telling us that t is greater than or equal to -7. So shoot it up this way because we want it to be greater than or equal to -7. So our solutions are here and also on the graph here. Okay? Now, to your worksheet. That was just a little bit of pre-teaching there. I know you've probably already reviewed this lesson before, but let's get to your worksheet. So numbers 1 and 2, they want you to, you have to read the directions carefully here. They want you to, let me grab my highlighter real quick, 1 second. It likes to hide from me. So they want you to write and graph. Let me highlight that for you. Write and graph an inequality. So we have to be careful that we make sure we take care of both of the things that they're asking us to do in that question. So let's read here. My family wants to collect at least 300 water bottles to take to the recycling center. Write and graph an inequality to describe the amount of water bottles I hope to collect. Now, you'll notice that on your worksheet, of course, the numbers are changed slightly, but the concept and the directions are the same. I don't want to give you the exact answers because you wouldn't be able to learn anything that way, right? So I'm giving you very similar examples. My family wants to collect at least 300 water bottles. Okay, so let's look at these keywords here, at least 300. That word at least is telling me something that I really need to pay attention to. At least 300 water bottles. So what would you do? Well, I like to use x as my variable for these. So I'm going to say my family wants to collect at least 300 water bottles. So that is telling me that they can collect 300, but I want them to do it in the form of x needs to be greater than or equal to 300, right? Because I would really like to have more than 300. But I can't have 300 to satisfy everyone. So that's why I'm saying it can be equal to 300, but I'd really like for it to be greater than or equal to 300. So this is part of your answer. That's the equation. That's the writing part. And then the graphing part is you're going to graph that on the graph that they provide you. So is this going to be a closed circle or an open circle? This will be a closed circle. And which way is my arrow going to shoot? Because I want more than 300, right? I really want to get more than 300, so I'm going to draw my arrow this way. Okay? So that is how you do number 1 and 2. Make sure you read your worksheet carefully. You're paying attention to the numbers that they give you. You're writing and you're graphing. So there are really 2 answers to these problems, writing and graphing. Okay, and you need to pay attention to those keywords they're giving you, like at least. Okay? Next is numbers 3, 4, and 5. You will notice on the worksheet that there is a rubric. You're getting 5 points per question, so you really need to keep glancing back at your rubric through every question that you walk through. Setting up the problem correctly, showing your work, arriving at the correct answer, checking your answers, and explaining your results. Okay? So that's a lot of points for each question. The width of my new garden is 6 feet. If the area of the garden is at least 48 feet, there's that word at least again. What is the smallest length of the garden could be? Okay, so first of all, what are they talking about? They're talking about area, and we need to remember something about area, don't we? What is the formula for area? Area equals length times width, right? And they're telling us one of the things. They're telling us width, so we've got that part down. So that could go into our equation, right? Width. And they're also telling us that the area is 48 feet. So let's set up our equation. We don't know the length because they didn't tell us that, but we do know the width. So we could say length times 6, right? Because they said that the width is 6, equals the area, which is 48 feet, right? So I'm just plugging this into the equation of area. Area equals length times width. There you go. They told us area. They told us width. Okay? But I don't want that equal sign in there, do I? Because we're dealing with inequalities. So what I need for you to do is remove that equal sign and replace it with an inequality. Okay? So what inequality do we do? It says it needs to be at least. So that means it could be 48 feet, right? But it could be greater than 48 feet. So it could be equal to 48 feet, but it also could be greater than 48 feet, right? So this would be the inequality sign that we want to use. So if these letters are throwing you off, just remember that you could write 6L is greater than or less is greater than or equal to 48, right? Then just clean up your equation. Remember, pretend it's an equal sign so that you remember what to do. Divide by 6 on both sides. So length, because they want to know the length, so length is greater than or equal to 8, right? Because 48 divided by 6 is 8, right? So let's look back at our rubric and just make sure that you've taken care of everything. So setting up the problem would be this part. Showing the work would be this part. Arriving at the correct answer would be this part. Checking your answer, you could say, okay, well, I'm going to plug 8 back in there and see if that makes sense. So you could just say 8 times 6 equals 48. Yeah, that works. So checking your answer. And then explaining your results. This is the part that I think students miss sometimes. You can write a sentence and say, just explain everything that we went through. If my width was 6 and my length is unknown, but I want my garden to be at least 48 feet, then the length, the smallest amount that my length could be would be 8. You could explain that in a sentence, or you could graph it, right? So 8, 9, 10. So we wanted the length to be equal to or greater than 8. So you could shoot your arrow this way. Okay, so you can do that to explain your result. So remember that there are 5 points for that. Okay, so go ahead, complete your worksheet, get that turned in. Thank you for watching. And if you need more help, of course, reach out to me.